Hello, everybody. Welcome to, I want to make sure I get it correct, Speak Up and Speak Out, Reflections of Love and Loss. Just a couple little pieces of housekeeping. And just so you all know, my name is Mike Durchslag, and I'll be moderating this, and I'll talk a little bit more myself. As we kind of go through this, I just want everybody to please know that if you feel that you need to step out, please feel free to, and there's professionals here to kind of help us through some things. What we're going to be discussing today are pretty difficult topics. I have the honor of being asked to do this, and when I was first asked by Tabitha, the first thought that came into my head was absolutely not. I didn't sign up for this. And the first, what came out of my mouth was, absolutely, I'd be honored to do this. I've worked for 29 years with adolescent recovery. I'm the director of the longest running recovery high school in the country, Pease Academy in Minneapolis. And so I get to work with families who have youth who are struggling with substance use and mental health. And I know in my time there that mental health and substance misuse walk hand in hand. And it's very hard to separate those two. And I also know both of those can be, and oftentimes are very deadly afflictions. A few years ago, I had a similar experience when a father reached out to me and asked me if I would officiate the funeral of his son, who was a student of mine, and he came to me as a 9th grader. And the first thought that came to my head when he asked me this was like, absolutely not, I did not sign up for this. I'm a principal of a school, that's what I do. And without hesitation, I let him know I'd be honored to be a part of that. And sometimes it kind of showing up as, in this capacity is one of the most courageous things we can do. You know, when and kind of go on the other side of this, I too am I am a person in long-term recovery, and I don't oftentimes share that when I'm in a professional setting, but I'm a person in long-term recovery. When I graduated college back in 1991, my father hugged me and he let me know, he said, I never thought you'd get out of Cleveland alive, because that's where I'm from. And as a 22-year-old, I kind of brushed it off and didn't think it was that big of a deal. That, okay, Dad, thanks for sharing that. And as I kind of moved through my life and I got married, my wife pulled me aside one day as my dad was visiting, and she said, Mike, your dad said the strangest thing to me. And I said, what was that? And she said, your dad said that he never thought you'd make it out of Cleveland alive. And I recognized in that moment the fear that my father lived in during those years where my mental health was very active, I wasn't taking care of myself, and I was actively engaging in my own destruction through substance use. And so in my work today as the director of Pease Academy, you know, I always, not only do I serve the youth, but I also think I try to serve the families, because I know that they live in fear, and we need to do everything we can to help support everybody. And it's a very difficult topic to talk about. It's a very difficult because sometimes we think we're alone, that we've done something wrong. And what I can say is my father did nothing wrong. He did nothing wrong. He was there every step of the way. And so today, we have two very, very courageous women who are here to share their stories. And I'm just going to introduce them. I'm going to read their little bios. So Nancy Espuche is a speaker, mother, author, and advocate who has the privilege to share her experience to audiences nationally. Her goal is to break the silence of a loved one's addiction, inspire those to open the dialogue, and bring forth hope and healing. She is the author of Cardboard House, My Life-Altering Journey Through Lucas's Addiction, to give voice to Lucas, his struggles for recovery, and their journey together. She offers a personal view of the power of addiction, the complexity of the human condition, and the reminder that despite all the love, no one can chart the course of another's life, no matter how hard they try. Nancy is here today to honor her beloved son, Lucas, who lost his battle with opioid addiction. So thank you, Nancy. And then we also have Carolyn Light Bell, who is a retired secondary English teacher, a writer, a mother, and photographer. She's published a variety of work both locally and nationally. Ms. Light Bell's most recent publication is the Joshua Poems, a collection of poetry honoring her youngest child, Joshua, who died by suicide. Her earlier works include 2 collections of short stories, 2 children's books, 2 collections of poetry. She was editor-in-chief of the late Rabbi Sim Glaser's collection of sermons and also edited a collection of meditations for Temple Israel. Most importantly, she wants everyone present to recognize the importance of being honest enough to seek counsel and support for mental health challenges that affect them and or their loved ones. Carolyn is here today to honor her son Joshua, who died by suicide and complications of addiction. So you can see with those bios the hardness, the difficulty of this conversation. And so I just want to honor you all being in here and offering your support today and the courage it takes to be here to kind of share your experience, strength, and hope in this. We won't be taking questions at the end. We'll just kind of go through this. If you are interested in talking to either of them later, they do have a resource table downstairs, and you can stop by there and share with them then. So my first question, and I will kind of go back and forth, is Nancy, how do we assist each other to grow in compassion and our capacity to be connected at these times of struggle?
I first want to make a little bit of a joke and say I'm sorry about Cleveland.
Oh,
and
that's
the
okay.
Guardians to the New York team. For anybody who's a New Yorker and is rooting for the Yankees. So, first and foremost, I want to say there's such value for me in talking to people like you who have taken the time and the effort and the open-heartedness to be with Carolyn and I today. It is, for me, just another notch of healing and giving me and my life hope. So I've got my notes. I do make reference to them because they're very helpful, but my story really is your story. It's a story of loss and love and uncertainty and fear and shame and stigma and hope. A little backstory on Lucas. Lucas was born with what is called an anomaly, a choledochal seal in his common bile duct, and he was a sick child. And what I've learned since then is that trauma is a very big component to those struggling with addiction later in life. Although Lucas grew up to be a very successful young man and a very eloquent and charming young man, he struggled immensely with a sense of self. I think that was the first lesson of importance for me when it comes to addiction and what I want to share with all of you, which is compassion is the key to somebody else's heart. And unless we are really present and available and open to what someone is saying, even silently, not through their words necessarily, but through their behavior, through their actions, through their body language, we are all speaking to each other all the time. And the best piece of information or advice, if I were to give to anybody, it would be to show up, to listen, and to pay attention, because connection is protection, as they say, and it is the key to keeping us all very safe and sound and sane. And I know for myself, without having the support that I had, these last 8 years would have been more intolerable than they've already been. So I think my greatest advice is to let people know you're there and listening. And it's no magic. There's nothing magical that I could offer you that would be important or a piece of advice to say do this or do that. It's really love your fellow human being. And know that we're all on this planet sharing one thing, and that's our humanity. And with that comes every feeling under the sun. And we need each other. We just need each other. So.
Thank you, Nancy. I know that in my own personal life and just being there, showing up for my children and just listening to them and just being present. In my professional life, the same thing with the youth I serve, and just importantly, the parents. And oftentimes, that's all I have to serve is just someone here to listen, to be present with them as they need to kind of go through stuff.
Yes.
Carolyn, how do you how do you think we assist each other to grow in compassion, our capacity to be connected in these times of struggle and difficulty?
Well, thank you all for coming. It means a lot that you have already made a choice by coming here, and for whatever your reasons, you are showing a lot of compassion to yourself, which it comes first, really. You have to take care of yourself so that you can take care of those around you. It's hard to know where to start to help others who may be facing loved ones' own challenges. We have our own challenges ourselves personally. But for Josh, whom we lost at age 44, I think what was so difficult for him, and then what's so difficult for many, including ourselves, is to be open and, even more importantly, to be vulnerable. And I feel very vulnerable right now because I can always hide behind my written word and my poems, but I can't hide in front of all your lovely faces. Many of you are friends, and I'm very grateful to see you. And those of you whom I don't know, I am here as someone who has suffered, but I think we all suffer. I should say, and I think we all do in our own ways, and what we need to help each other with is to ask, what is it that I can help you with? How can I commiserate? I learned really what that word meant by thinking about it. Be with someone who's feeling miserable, or who is suffering in some way, or who is facing mental health challenges, or is facing addiction. How can we be best with you? There's someone in this room, and I don't want to embarrass her by pointing her out, but she was with me by just sitting with me and looking at me. She didn't say anything, but she knows who she is. And I know you're all here for different reasons. To be vulnerable, which I said already, is allowing others into yourself, into your own experience, into your life, into what you need. So Michael asked us before, and maybe Tabitha did too, if there were anything that we could share with you. If you don't have them, they're here for you. But the first one on top that I seem to have felt compelled to write first is share your vulnerability with people you believe you can trust. That's all we can do, is believe that you can trust them. I've had people run from me because they're afraid of what I might exude. One woman told me that she was afraid that her own son might take his life, which is how Joshua died. And that's why it was so hard for her to be present with me. And that helped me understand. She was being vulnerable, and I appreciated that. I learned from her, and we can learn from each other. We need each other.
Thank you. We really do need each other, and that idea of vulnerability is so difficult for so many of us, because maybe I should just speak for myself, to show up as my true authentic self and allow another person in is one of the most difficult things for me to do. I only remember my father crying twice in his life. The first time was when his mom died, and the second time was over me. And so I say that only because I was raised in that same way. You cannot see what's really going on inside. But as Carolyn said, we have to take that leap of faith and allow other people into our lives, because that's really kind of how we heal, and how we begin that journey of healing. And in our journey of healing, that's how we help other people heal as well. Just like that woman who shared with you, she was so afraid, right? She had her own fear. So Carolyn, I'm going to have you start with the second question, if that's okay. And you can say no. So I would rather not, but we're going to try this.
Michael, I'll do it.
What are some actions on this journey that helped? That informed help, hope, and healing?
Health, hope, and healing. Health is take care of yourself first, which I said already. The second thing on this sheet that I wrote is you may not feel brave, but you have to be brave, and that's where my health came in. I did things I didn't necessarily want to do, but had to do. Actually, one of them is being here for you. It's not that I didn't want to be here, but one of the things I felt almost immediately after Josh died was that I wanted to help others. And that's part of my mental health, even though it's hard sometimes. And healing is what I just do out of habit. I can't help writing. I don't do it for the purpose of being healthy or of catharsis or anything like that. It just is what I do.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. And I know when I work with teachers, we always have to take care of ourselves first. Because if we don't take care of ourselves first, we can't show up in the way we want to show up in other people's lives. And we can't wait until we feel brave. We just have to show up when it's asked. And in that doing, that's what true courage is, right? Just showing up even when we don't want to, or we don't think we can. Nancy, so what are some actions you've taken on this journey that has helped, that informed help, hope, and healing?
It took a village. It just took a village. It was impossible to do it alone. I think living life alone is pretty tough too. During Lucas's early stages of addiction, the first thing that came up for me was I'm blinded and I'm deaf. I knew nothing, I couldn't see clearly, and I had no idea how to proceed. And I thought that this was just a phase and I didn't want to know anything else. So the first thing I did was I sought out help. I'm from New York, and I sought out help to engage in a group for mothers whose children were struggling with addiction, where I got my first dose of elementary school and substance use, and was completely shocked and dismayed, and quite frankly, I denied everything that I heard for quite a while. But as Lucas's addiction got more active, it became imperative to me that I get much more engaged and involved with people who really walk this walk and who really understood what this was all about. And I entrenched myself around those who had such experience. I needed their wisdom, I needed their minds, I needed their hearts, and I needed their version of my story. I think after that, what became most important to me was really starting to speak publicly about my story. I was grateful for having the opportunity and having a family that embraced me. And I remember when I first moved to Minnesota, going to an Al-Anon group, and somebody was talking about their child who was in treatment, except that their parents and their relatives all thought that this person was still in college. And every time they interacted with their relatives, their child was in college, when in actuality their child was in treatment. And feeling so incredibly sad that people were unable, due to the stigma and the shame that we feel as individuals and as parents and as mothers about their child's substance use problem. So I wanted to tell my story, and I wanted to stand up loud and clear and let people know that this was a version of a life that is hard and hurtful and sorrowful, and I don't know which way it's going to end. But that I wasn't alone, and I didn't want people to feel alone. So, you know, my healing continues this day forward. I speak, I write, I cry. I talk to people that I adore. People that adore me have never stepped away. And for that, you know, I guess I'll end on this note. As Viktor Frankl says, the purpose of life is to give life meaning. And I have done my very darndest since that awful day to find meaning. And I guess showing up for everybody here is my way of sharing my purpose.
And then, you know, I think that when I think, not to come into this with any kind of expectations, but really I think one of my hopes is that when we hear these stories or hear the strength, and that we'll reach out to someone and share and open up, because that community, that connection, that village can be created. I mean, you had the benefit of going to Nar-Anon. There's Al-Anon, there's Nar-Anon, there's Thrive Family Recovery Services. There's these things. But one of my first introductions to JFCS was actually through a couple of moms who found each other because their children were struggling with their own substance use and their own mental health, and they had the courage to share with one another, and they happened to have the same name. And all of a sudden, this small little group started, and they said, I know someone else, and it was a small group of 4 women who got together once a week just to share space. And then it kind of grew, and more people became part of this group, and then they had to limit it. But it's just opening up and being vulnerable and allowing other people in, I think, can start creating space where it's okay to say my child struggles with this, and or I am struggling with that. There is no shame, it just is. So Nancy, what has your reflection taught you about your children, yourself, and the people around you?
Well, for this, I may need a tissue. Lucas was my greatest teacher. He taught me life's largest lessons: unconditional love, forgiveness, acceptance, compassion, kindness, gentleness, sorrow. He led me to wonder. He led me to inquire. He led me to look at deep. He showed me the ways of the human heart, and reminded me that we are each unique and special and important. He simply made me a better person. And in doing so, he taught me how to be a better parent, a more compassionate woman, a better friend, and a more accepting, non-judgmental human. And in all of this, my greatest reflection and what I have gotten is that Lucas really taught me about love. Love for our children, love for ourselves, and love for all of us. You know, I just heard Andrew Garfield on a podcast. Anderson Cooper now has a podcast on grief. And it's quite meaningful. And Andrew Garfield was his last guest. And Andrew Garfield's mother died. And he said I don't know what the question was exactly, but Andrew's response was, and I wrote it down because I want to keep it close to my heart. He said, the wound in losing my mother is my only route to feel close to her. So I need to keep that wound open, even just for a little bit. He didn't say it exactly that way, but and he said, the grief that I'm experiencing is how I feel closest to her. And I guess for me, although I do believe that I am certainly in a safer, less sorrowful place than I was 8 years ago, I will never say that I will be healed, because I won't be. And this wound will be forever open, and sometimes it's more open than not. But it is the place that I get to feel closest to Lucas when I'm hurting the most, because that's how much I loved him and love him. So I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it does more than that. Thank you. You know, it's interesting because as we deal with these topics of grief, we're told, like, you know, I had a dear friend who said, Mike, everybody grieves differently. And there's this book that, you know, tells you about the stages of grief, and then he said some expletives in terms of that doesn't really apply. We all grieve in our own ways. And it's in that grief that we feel the closest, you know, and you know, I've lost, I lost my mom, but I also have lost students along the way, because mental health is deadly. Substance use can be deadly. And there have been times when I wanted to show up angry. I'm like, well, they knew the risks, and I don't want to be there. And then, but I would show up at the funeral anyways, because that's what we're supposed to do, and it hurts, and it's but it's like, it's what we're supposed to grieve. We're supposed to feel sad. We're supposed to shed tears. And those tears can be tears of sadness. They can be tears of gratitude. And they can all be wrapped up in one messy ball that brings meaning, right? And all those gifts that you share, those are those spiritual principles that I try to aspire to live in and on a daily basis, right? And I know that the youth and your children, you know, I have found that those who struggle with mental health and those who struggle with substance use are oftentimes the most creative, compassionate individuals, intelligent. They feel things very differently or more intensely than what we might say the normal person, whatever that is, right? They're really incredibly special people.
Yeah.
Carolyn, so when you're reflecting, what has your reflection taught you about your child, yourselves, and the people around you?
Well, as we were talking, I was hearing Joshua, and sometimes he's telling me what to do. Stephanie knows what I'm talking about. Our beautiful oldest daughter is here, oldest child. But yes, he can tell me what to do, sort of, but what I'm doing now, I'm doing because of him, almost despite him, because he would be telling me, there's nothing wrong with me. I've got it all under control. And he didn't have it all under control. And I realize that in terms of reflections, that's what I realize now more than I ever did. And his keeping that secret from himself and from the world is what I'm here to tell you doesn't work. And despite his constant reassurances, Mom, I've got this, everything's good. I've got a team. They're working, we're all working together. That was bullshit. Expletive. His team was his drug dealer, whatever the drug was that he happened to be taking at the time, and his own delusion, which was the result of the drug, and the fact that he thought he could control his bipolar disease by himself. And that was just not right. Not by Western medicine, and he didn't really buy Western medicine. So what I've reflected on since he's been gone is not just how much we've lost because he's no longer here, but how much all of us lose when we don't know how to tell people, you know, I'm calling your shots here. What you're saying to me is not making sense. So here are the places that you can go, and here are the places that you should go. You know, he cut off communication with us, so it wasn't possible for us to connect with him for the last 6 months of his life. Which was everyone's loss. And he spent that time alone. But this is the fool, the jester, the trickster that speaks in place of the real person. And Joshua was a beautiful, brilliant, funny person who offered many a great deal of compassion and empathy and understanding and intelligence. But not when he wasn't right. When he wasn't right, he was none of those things. He put on a great act. He was a terrific actor. He was a film director. He knew how to operate. So my reflections on my own life are maybe a little more, I like to think I'm less intense than I ever was. What do you think? How am I doing? But I desperately want those of you who can help others who are in your lives to seek help yourselves so you can find places that will assist you in this effort to help others. Because we can't force other people to do things. And I don't know how I could have been a better mother, or my husband could have been a better father, or our daughter and son could have been better siblings. And his friends were amazing. But he didn't tell the truth. So I don't know exactly, Michael, how to answer you. I have a poem in here about reflections. I've had many of them since he's been gone. But they really have more to do with the evolution of life and coming to accept the fact that he's gone now. And that's the hardest part. He's gone from my life and from all those lives whom he so loved and who loved him. So, you know, I don't know what else to say.
When you shared about your son, you know, strangely enough, and I would tell people in my life, when they say you have a drug problem, no, I don't have a drug problem. You have a problem with me using drugs. Yeah. and I say that in all sincerity, and yeah, it's kind of funny, but like in hindsight, I'm like, oh my gosh, right? And what I can say is that sometimes there's going to be those moments of just clarity, and those moments of clarity for that individual who's struggling or suffering, the window is very short, and so if it's there, to strike while the iron is hot, as the saying goes, because we don't know when we'll get another opportunity. And the first loss I experienced in my job was a young man by the name of Nathan. And he came to us at the school as a 18-year-old off the streets of Tacoma, Washington, and struggled with some significant mental health issues. And he has 0 credits to his name. And we suggested GED, and he said, I want to graduate high school. And he did graduate high school as a 22-year-old, and he was the only graduate on stage. And I say all that because, I was younger. And he was probably maybe 5 years younger than I was. We listened to the same music. We had the same interests. When I wasn't at work, I dressed very similarly to him. You know, we were almost in a very real way 2 peas in a pod. And a few years later, he died. And I showed up at the funeral, and 2 things struck to me. One was how his community that he had built while he was at the school showed up for him and his family. And the other thing was, and I always carry this, was what the pastor said, or the minister. He said, his struggle is over. because he's battling valiantly, your son battled valiantly against his mental health for years, valiantly for his substance misuse for years. And they were successful for years. And the battle is over. And they are at peace. That's what the pastor said. It's us who are still here, who need to figure out how to move forward and find that peace, which is something you two are doing today in a very real way, is to move forward in peace.
May I
Yeah,
just-
please.
Yeah. There is the genetic factor.
Yeah.
And both with mental illness and with addiction, there is the genetic factor. And not only was I myself addicted until 1980, and I'll always be an addict, so I have to be careful not to use mind-altering substances, although everything we take alters us to some extent. I'm talking about the dangerous ones I've stopped taking. But I also have a predisposition to certain depression, you know. But I don't feel depressed now and haven't for years, but that doesn't mean that my family didn't carry this genetic factor. I mention this because there are certain things we can't do anything about. And our DNA is one of them. So I do my best to be healthy. I do almost better than best to be healthy now in ways that I didn't before he died. And there's something personal I'll share. I have a little beautiful box in which there are some of his ashes. And when there's a very difficult moment, like I had this morning before I came here, I take my finger and I dip it in there because I want to remember him more closely and feel his strength, because he had a tremendous amount of strength. And I carry that with me.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So Nancy, how do we assist each other to grow in compassion and our capacity to be connected in those times of struggle?
I think, as said earlier, you know, we all are witness to others' vulnerability, others' hurt, others' sorrow, others' joy, others' essence, and that also does include, of course, the darkness of life and the grief, because where there's light, there is dark, and we, as humans, get to see both sides very clearly, sadly. And we also get to see shame. You know, people wear shame very differently. The masks of shame have very different faces. Mental health is one of them. Addiction is clearly a costume of shame. And personified, I think, and frailty and fear. So I think by experiencing others' wounds and people's self-perceived shortcomings, again, the greatest gift that we can give somebody is to stay present, to listen, to hold close, to remember that what looks like an enemy is really somebody trying to give us something important to learn about ourselves. You know, the world, I'm a big believer that the world mirrors back to us exactly what it is we need to learn in any given moment. And if it's darkness, then we need to look inside and try to ask ourselves why this is present. Lucas's darkness consistently didn't just nudge me, it shoved me into the door of consciousness in a particular way that I had never been conscious before, which is to exhibit and to feel somebody else's sorrow and pain. Before I could judge it and intellectually understand it, but Lucas taught me how to feel it, and I think that's the best thing that we can offer someone, is just to simply to put ourselves in their shoes, to do our very darndest to try on somebody else's clothing and to wear it for just 5 minutes, and to remember that we all share that thread of humanity, and that there are just so many feelings that we have that everybody else in this world is experiencing one way or another, or one day or another. So I think we assist each other by first, as said earlier, showing compassion for ourselves is critical, and being brave. You know, I bought a plaque for Lucas when he left for college, and it said, "Be bold, be brave, be you," and it's sort of become my mantra. And I think it's what I would offer everybody, you know, without those words, but just encouraging people to be brave, to show up for themselves, and to show up for them.
When I hear you talk and how you're sharing those gifts, it's that connection of the heart, right? It's that empathy that we feel. We might not know why, you know, that we might not know exactly what they're going through, but we can understand maybe the emotions behind what they're feeling. And sometimes it's not about what they're saying, but frequently it's about why they're saying it. And we just have to show up.
Can I just add one thing?
Oh, you absolutely can. You can have 2 things if you want.
I think if I were to say to anybody, if somebody were to ask me what has become most important to you about your life moving forward, I would say acceptance, and I would also say powerlessness, because if there's anybody who believed that they could change the course of Lucas's life, I believed it was me. I was certain that I was going to save him and that he was going to make it through. And I say that because I think accepting life on life's terms, as they say in those rooms, is the thing that has really propelled me forward, that has allowed me to step into the light every day and not into the dark. So, but we are all powerless. You know, we all think we can chart the course of another's life, as it says in my book, and I learned in the most horrible way that it isn't true, and that the only one that we're responsible for, really, as adults, and who we can really control is ourselves. And that's a hard life lesson.
And as a parent, that's horrible. I mean,
Yes.
in all sincerity, it's horrible, right? Because these are my children. These are the ones I love, you know, and it's just, and I'm powerless, right? They get to make their own choices, and as a parent, it's hard.
Can you guys pass the Kleenex?
Thank you for asking and taking care of yourself.
I love Laura.
In that moment of brevity, you know, there's this idea that before I move on to Carolyn, there's this idea I was taught that the greatest gift we have as humans is our feelings, is our emotions. And someone shared with me once, it's like, Mike, in order to feel here the lightness, we also have to feel the darkness. And not what that we want to be in either, you know, be down there for very long, but we have to acknowledge that that's part of our life experience. And it'll always be part of our life experience. And it's how we walk through it that really matters. And how we walk through it, even more importantly, probably how we walk through it together. Because we can't do this alone. So Carolyn, how do we, on that vein, how do we assist each other to grow in compassion and our capacity to be connected in these times of struggle?
How do we grow?
How do we
what you're
assist each other in
How
this
do we-
growth?
How do we assist each other in this growth? Oh boy. Well, boy, I think everybody who came here is assisting everybody else. I mean, we have to be open to learning, and we don't have the answers. We have a few. We have our own. And how do we assist? I don't know. I think we have to be open. That's my big thing, is we have to listen. We've said that already, but you know, I want to go back, Michael. I have to, and Nancy, what you were saying about trying to help. Joshua was 44 when we lost him, when he made the choice. So, I bring that up because the whole 6 months that I mentioned to you already, we were not allowed to have communication with him by his own decision. We have a place with a little lake that's very cold, and every summer, that summer before he died, it's still hard to say he died, so I have to say it with the same insistence that I said this. You don't feel brave, but you have to be brave, and I wrote that on this yellow sheet. And I said that before I went swimming every day when it was very cold in that little lake. You don't feel brave, but you have to be brave. And then I would go in the water. And that's what brought all of you here, what brought me here, what brought Nancy here, what brought Michael here. And I can't pretend to teach anybody anything anymore, really. I can only be who I am and share it. I spent my life as a teacher, and you know, I try not to tell other people what to do. That's hopeless. Stephanie knows I'm no good at it. Well, I'm better at it. Would you say I'm better? Thank you. By example, maybe. I tried that with my kids. I think it worked a little. My greatest, the one who listens to me the best is Eddie, my husband, who's here. And so we listen to each other, and because other people have told us, you know, you're so courageous and all of that. Well, I don't wake up in the morning and say, you know, I'm so courageous, I'm so this, and I don't talk to myself really in that way. I just plunge forward, because if I don't plunge forward, I'm in a static position, and that won't do. I mean, I'm looking at the beautiful tree that's losing its leaves, and even as it's losing its leaf, it's growing new ones, and all the new friends I've made, and the people I've gotten to know. This is what keeps me going.
You know, I thank you, because I was going to ask you a question, and you kind of answered, because you talked about being open. And I was like, well, it's so easy to say it, but how do you do it? And you just shared that. So thank you.
Well, it takes people who are listening or open also.
Yeah. So thank you both. You know, I know that that idea that, you know, being that example, and that's, you know, kind of how we show up in life. You know, I remember making what I thought was a big mistake, and then own it in front of my family, and having to show up and own it in front of them, and the lessons that we're learning there, because that's what I want for my own children, is for them to, you know, when they make mistakes, which is okay, to just own it. I didn't want to. So, Carolyn, what are some actions on the journey that informed help, hope, and healing?
We did that
Health, hope, and
one.
healing.
I think we did
Is
that.
it?
Yeah,
I think we did
it's
that
okay.
one.
Do we
Every
not
time
have
you
that
asked it, it could be different, but
Yeah.
maybe.
Oh, am I just? Oh, did we already answer that? Did I double do that?
That's
Oh my
okay,
gosh!
Michael.
Oh, you're
Just keep
right.
going.
Oh,
I think
look
those
at
were them.
I'm just reading my script.
That's fine, you're good.
No,
You're good.
okay. No, you already answered that. So, anything, thank you, Nancy. Like, what, I need to pay better attention.
I heard
to
that.
what I'm thinking. Anything in the last couple that either of you two would like to share? And there doesn't have to be, but because we're kind of running out of time. But are there any last minute things that you want to share with the group?
I think what just came into my head that I think is important if anybody knows somebody struggling with substance use. You know, we're all very quick to deny our instincts or to deny our initial knee-jerk responses to something. But quite often, those are correct or informative pieces of information that we are being given by our higher selves, and that we are being given the opportunity to pay attention. And when it comes to substance use, it's pretty terrifying to pay attention to anything that's being said that's outside of one's rationale or one's consciousness. And I could give you all the woulda, shoulda, couldas, because I live with terrible regret as a parent, and not because I didn't love Lucas from here to eternity and back again, but because I didn't know everything I wish I had known at the time that he was in his early stages of addiction, and the things that I wish I had done that may have steered the course of his life differently. I don't know. I'll never know. But what I do know is that those little rays of sunlight, you know, those little golden nuggets that you get from somebody that you suddenly talk to on the street corner that gives you something to think about, or that voice in your head that says, trouble, or go find somebody, or do something, that you do it, that you listen, that you pay close attention. Because we ignore that subtle, quiet, hushed voice a lot, but it's the one that is often speaking the truth to us. And as somebody who wishes it would have pounded harder in my head or smashed me over the head to say, you cannot ignore me, I invite or ask you to do that for yourselves or for people that you know. Because substance abuse is a very slippery slope. And it grabs hold of you really quickly if it's going to grab hold of you. And there's no turning back once you're on that sled. And the only turning back is recovery. And that often takes a long time. Lucas went to 4 treatments and fought tooth and nail. Why some make it and some don't, I don't know. But I encourage you not to dismiss what is so incredibly valuable, that kind of information, that kind of knowing, that kind of intuitive instinct that is very bold and loud.
Carolyn?
You know, on my little list, my handy little list, I wrote take your time. And that's better for me than it is for some people. I am an impulsive person by nature. So for those of you who have an impulse to say something that comes to mind right away, or for those of us who speak before you think, you know, just saying. I'm one of those people, so I have to take my time. And I have to take my time through life now because it's certainly not ever what I expected it to be. So whatever I have left, I'm going to take it and ease into the next minute. I'm talking to myself really, and talking to you at the same time. You're eavesdropping on my heart. Because that's all we've got is time. That's all we've got as far as we know.
our most valuable resource is our time. I just try to share that all the time. And I know something I've been trying to do more and more consistency is honor that little voice. Like so I think about like, oh, I wonder how so-and-so is doing, to honor that little voice. And when I think that, is to pick up the phone and call them. You know, and what amazing things happen when I honor that little voice. You know, so I want to thank both Carolyn and Nancy today for being part of this experience. You know, I shared earlier that I remember when my dad only crying twice in my life, and here I am. We are sharing tears with each other, and I think that's really important. That I don't have to be that person, and we don't have to be that person. We can be this community. And so I thank you for your courage, your willingness, just you honoring both your sons' lives and your families. Because I don't know about the rest of you, but I come out of this with a real sense of hope and a sense of courage and a sense of boldness. Because we are not alone. We're not alone. So thank you all for being here. I can't share my appreciation enough. We're going to be in the resource room, so if you want to talk to us more, you can. There's also a evaluation in your packet, so we encourage you, the committee is encouraging you to fill it out and let us know what you think about this and the other sessions you go to. And will be lunch downstairs.
Michael, did you want me to read a poem?
Oh yeah, read your poem. Oh goodness. It's not in my script, but yes, I should be in my script.
Okay.
We'll
So,
close with this.
thank you. So I have to stand so I have a little breath. Is that okay?
Of course.
So this is the book I wrote. Some of it was written before Josh died, and many of the poems were written afterwards. And some of you have heard these before, but they come from this book. This is a photograph I took of him when he was surfing one morning in California, and I wanted to go, so I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And this is the one that Michael and Tabitha picked, I think. It's called I've Never Written About the Joy. I've never written about the absolute joy of each one's birth. Stephanie born on an April day when I wore ribbons in my hair. Randy born on a bright May day after the arc of a scarlet sunrise. Joshua born last to surprise me when I expected a girl. I've never written about the joy spying Joshua in the field of 4-year-old faces at 4:15 after a long day of teaching. At last, full of aching guilt, I'd cry when he leapt into my arms and we, both anxious to hug and sniff and kiss, drove home to the swaying black fluff of a dog whose tail beat a solid rhythm against our legs. I've never written about the joy when, after days of planning and cleaning for my daughter's 12th birthday, she smiled and said, "Oh, Mommy," in a grown-up voice, standing on a stool to peek into the floral bag, and then, unable to resist, tore open the paper of a bouquet of white flowers all for her. I've never written about the joy as I watched them all finally not fighting over who got the extra cookie, but instead constructing Lego spaceships, castles, and cars, all 3 children together quietly on the orange shag rug. I've never written about the joy when I heard "thank you," or "you're a good cook," or "you're nice." When they ask questions like, "Is God in walls?" or "Will you play with me, Mommy?" When one night our whole family madly rode bikes around Lake of the Isles, competing to see who could go farthest no-handed, and were bombarded by bats. I've never written about the joy of caring for their needs with Band-Aids, long lectures, and new clothes. I've never written about the joy of having both boys and a girl, the thrill of watching small bodies grow. I've never written about the joy of reading stories at night while rocking them, tucking in their sleepy selves, tiptoeing past their curled shapes to turn out the light. Certain I'd see them again in the morning, all fuzzy with hair sticking out and stale breath, wanting breakfast. I've never written about the joy of learning each other's inconsistencies and tantrums, rantings and whims, and at the end of the day be all kisses and hugs, adoring each other anyway. Because, well, just because.
Thank you, everybody, again. It was really wonderful for you being here today.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.